Good evening and welcome back to Fidelis. Tonight we are talking about the Immaculate Conception. And as I'm sure many of you already know, that is tomorrow, and it is a holy day of obligation, so what better thing to discuss tonight? We have a few different topics that we're going to go over, but first, let's talk about what is the Solemnity of the Immaculate Conception.
Hi. Okay. So happy Advent, everybody. It is now a few days into Advent, and we're happy to be with you again. The Immaculate Conception. So technically, sorry, I'm trying to position something behind my laptop. The Immaculate Conception actually started at sundown because it's a solemnity. So it started when Vespers, I guess, was prayed in all the religious communities and by priests and stuff. So happy Feast of Solemnity of the Immaculate Conception. The Immaculate Conception is a day when we celebrate the fact that Mary was conceived immaculately. So she was conceived without sin. Immaculate just means without stain. It's like if you break down the Latin word, it just means she didn't have any stain, and that stain would have been original sin, which came from Adam and Eve. Mary is called the new Eve in Catholic theology because Eve 1.0 screwed us all by accepting that stupid apple, and we all ended up with original sin on our souls, and then the consequences of original sin, which are concupiscence, which is like our propensity to sin even after we're baptized. So obviously we needed Jesus to come so that we could be rescued basically from that sin. And Mary, who was chosen to be the vessel of Jesus and the mother of God, was conceived without that stain. So a lot of people would ask, how is that possible, since Jesus didn't die on the cross until 40 something years after Mary was conceived. And it's kind of like the grace is retroactive. So we're not theologians, but we're just going to share some good resources tonight to help us understand the Immaculate Conception, what it is, how it came about, how it became a dogma, but also to just deepen our devotion to Our Lady. I feel like if we understand her a little bit better and understand the doctrines about her, then it will help us to foster a relationship with her. So I want to talk about a little bit about the doctrine or the dogma of the Immaculate Conception. It's pretty rare for popes to use their authority as popes to declare something a dogma, meaning that it's not optional. There are a lot of things that are up to kind of theological opinion, or they're still being debated, or it's possible to take different positions but still be rooted in the truths of the faith. But when it comes to the Immaculate Conception, that's one of those non-negotiable beliefs that we have. It was proclaimed I think it was a papal bull, is what the statement was called. I have to double check this, but it was called Ineffabilis Deus, which means the ineffable God. And that happened in 1854 by Pope Pius IX. I'm obviously checking notes to tell you guys this stuff. But I wanted to read a little blurb from that proclamation where the Pope said that this is what happened to Mary, and you have to believe that in order to be a Catholic in good standing. So he said, "We declare, pronounce, and define that the doctrine which holds that the Blessed Virgin Mary, at the first instant of her conception, by a singular privilege and grace of the omnipotent God, and virtue of the merits of Jesus Christ, the Savior of mankind, was preserved immaculate from all stain of original sin, has been revealed by God, and therefore should firmly and constantly be believed by all the faithful." And something I found really interesting when I was reviewing the history of this dogma and how it has affected the church since then is that it seems like there was a pretty widespread acceptance of the Immaculate Conception prior to it being proclaimed a dogma. So it wasn't like the Pope was news flash, breaking news, suddenly we know that Mary was immaculately conceived. No, it was understood, and I think his proclamation was more of an affirmation of what was already being embraced by the church, because Mary was declared the patroness of the United States before the dogma was pronounced, like 9 or 10 years or something before. I thought that was a cool thing that I came across when I was reading about all this. So it was already a widely held devotion.
Now, one thing that I'm a little bit unclear about when it comes to the Immaculate Conception, I've heard it said that the reason that God created Mary this way was because she needed to be free of sin in order to bring Jesus into the world, who is also free of sin. So can you kind of talk about that, whether that's true or false, or kind of up in the air still, or,
Well, Mary, obviously Jesus is divine and Jesus is God. And we all know that we don't equivocate like Mary and Jesus. Jesus
Right.
was God, a person of the Trinity. And so it is, God could have chosen anyone he wanted to carry him in their earthly body. But from what I understand, and we can all fact check me, but from what I understand, it just made sense that Mary would be a sinless vessel. So God becoming man, it made sense in the divine plan for him to choose somebody who was without stain to be the vessel that would carry him on earth. I was reading a little bit about this question earlier today, and it seemed like the consensus was that God could have chosen anybody. He didn't have to choose someone who was immaculate, but it wouldn't have really made sense for a regular old Joe to carry Jesus.
So you were mentioning that the Immaculate Conception is the patroness of the Americas. So how did that come about, and what does that mean?
Yes. I pulled up I want to see if I can find it. I pulled up the proclamation where Mary was named the patroness of the United States. So I think the patroness of the Americas, like North, South, and Central, is Our Lady of Guadalupe. But the patroness of the United States and several other countries, like what were the others? Korea, I think, Spain, Portugal, Ireland. There were 5 or 6 or 7 countries that named her their patronal, their patron. And so that happened on July 2nd, 1847. So that was, like I said, 9 years or something before Mary was the dogma of the Immaculate Conception came from the Pope. And I think the same Pope approved, because what happens is when a patron is selected for a country, that country's bishops kind of get huddle together and they decide who their patron is going to be. And then the Pope gives his assent. So I'm pretty sure it was the same Pope who proclaimed the dogma of the Immaculate Conception and affirmed Mary as our patroness.
So what does that mean for Mary to be the patroness of the United States?
Well, basically, we Americans can look to Mary under her title of the Immaculate Conception as a special protector of our country. So we should, I don't know if this is how the church would explain it, but for me, I feel like we should look at it as part of our national identity, as being under the protection of Our Lady of the Immaculate Conception, and kind of take special efforts to understand that that title of Mary. And also that is why the Immaculate Conception is a holy day of obligation. It's called a proper holy day of obligation in the United States. So it's proper to the United States. Not all countries have December 8th as a holy day of obligation. But for us, it is because she's our patroness.
Okay. What else do you think people would need to know if they're not familiar with the Immaculate Conception?
Well, I have some really good resources to mention because, like I said, we're not theologians, but we just want to share some great things that we found. Father Mike obviously I always go back to Father Mike because he has he can tell you how something works in 5 minutes. I'm going to post all these later, but he has a really good video. I also recommend that people read the Vatican II document, Lumen Gentium. Chapter 8 is like a beautiful description of Mary that goes into the Immaculate Conception. And Vatican II, which took place from like 1962 to 1965, I think, it closed on December 8th, 1965. So this is like the 62nd anniversary of the closing of Vatican II. And that was a really important council in the Catholic Church. It ended on the Solemnity of the Immaculate Conception, and there was some focus on the Immaculate Conception in that council. And so Lumen Gentium is a really good document to read. There is a National Catholic Register article that I'm going to share that's just like a Q&A about the Immaculate Conception. Mm-hmm. There is, what else do I have? Oh, the Catechism, paragraphs, I don't know where I wrote it, 490 through 493 are specifically about the Immaculate Conception. And then paragraph 494 is also really beautiful about Mary. So I will post that. And then I'll also post the USCCB link about the Holy Days of Obligation in the United States and any other great things that we find along the way.
So one thing that I was thinking about, today, in the run up to tonight's video is how do we make the Immaculate Conception relate to us as people? And you mentioned obviously as Americans, that right there makes it kind of special for us. Mm-hmm. But what are some other ways you would say that just as average everyday people, something as incredible as the Immaculate Conception, how does that relate to us?
Well, Mary relates to us because Jesus entrusted Mary to all of us through St. John when he was on the cross, and he said, son, behold your mother, and woman, behold your son. That was kind of a figure of Christ entrusting all of humanity with Mary and entrusting Mary with all of humanity. And because she is faithful to her son and she wants the salvation of everybody, like she is really I think wanting to have a relationship with all of us. And so if we can understand her better, I think we can get to know her better and develop that relationship with her. And understanding as to the best that we can, the Immaculate Conception is a really good way to just get to know Mary. And so we can grow in our relationship with her and our devotion to her by reading about the Immaculate Conception, trying to understand what it means and what its implication is on church history and salvation history.
One thing that I noticed that I thought was kind of a different way of looking at it is that, the Immaculate Conception itself, how it happened, mm-hmm. and the fact that St. Anne and St. Joachim, Mary's parents were, not a whole lot is known factually about their life, but, kind of the legend is that they were not able to have children, and they struggled with infertility until old age, and that Mary was kind of, their miracle baby in every way, literally every way.
For sure.
So I found that kind of interesting, and it gave me kind of another way of, looking at it, that this is something that for people who are maybe struggling with infertility could be something for them to get, some strength and hope and faith from.
Yeah, the story, the whole story of, I like to say the origin story of the saints, because they're kind of like superheroes, Mary's origin story is so cool. And we, like you said, we don't know like a lot factually about Anne and Joachim, but the understanding is that they were infertile, and I think they were believed to like be advanced in years to be an older couple when Anne did become pregnant with Mary. So she brought so much joy into their lives, I'm sure. And then just the fact that she was probably such a good kid because she didn't ever sin. So it just must have been such a great like experience to raise the child Mary,
Now, do you think that they knew that she would like Mary obviously knew about Jesus, but did Anne and Joachim know about Mary being without sin?
I would think so. I don't know if we know that for sure, but I know Mary was presented. The tradition is that Mary was presented in the temple when she was a child and dedicated to God. And I'm sure that she was vocally cooperative with God and really devout. So I would imagine that they could sense that if they weren't like conveyed that directly by God, himself or something. I imagine that they did know that Mary was definitely a special child. And, all the Old Testament scripture and the Torah, like the prophecies about Jesus and how Jesus was going to, and the Redeemer was going to enter the world are pretty clear. And so I feel like if Anne and Joachim were obviously practicing Orthodox faithful Jews, they probably could put 2 and 2 together and like deduce that Mary was chosen by God. But I don't know.
Well, there's a novena, leading up to the Immaculate Conception. Actually, I've been doing it. So that could be something that maybe for people who are struggling with infertility to, each year to pray before this Holy Day of Obligation, before this solemnity.
It's a good idea. Yeah, you should post that on our video when we're done.
What else would you think that people should know? Is there anything else that you would want to cover or talk about in regards to this?
I think that's it. We probably missed a bunch of little points, but we just kind of wanted to hash it out a little bit and kind of dig into what does the Immaculate Conception mean. I know when you first hear the term Immaculate Conception, even if you're a practicing Catholic, it's easy to forget what it is because I don't know. I even do this where I think that it refers to the conception of Jesus, the Annunciation. Like if you're just not thinking, it's easy to like mix those up in your head and to not slow down and be like, wait, what are we celebrating on the Solemnity of the Immaculate Conception? It's a special feast day to me because I entered the monastery on December 8th, 2005. So it's like an anniversary for me. And I know that might sound weird because I didn't end up obviously staying in a monastery and I got married and had kids, but I like, it's such a special day for me to like remember that time. And like, it was such a gift from God to be able to go through that experience and to celebrate it on December 8th. Apparently it was extremely weird that I chose that day to enter because no one had ever chosen that day before because they want to like spend Christmas with their family and then enter. So like January 1st was a really popular day to choose to enter, but I was just like ready to go, man. So yeah, it was cool. I was like the only person that had that solemnity as my entrance day and stuff. So I always remember it fondly.
So do you feel like because of that, you have maybe a more special connection to Our Lady of the Immaculate Conception?
I don't know. I mean, to be honest, I did my first, what's it called? The de Montfort consecration to Mary on that feast day. So it's always been a special feast day to me, but a lot of the theology of it has eluded me, to be honest. I really do have to go back and like study it every year if I'm going to like enter into the mystery, I guess you would say, properly. I don't know. It feels like some of this stuff is heavy theology, but on the other hand, it all does make sense and like fulfills scripture.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. But I think that it's easy for people to miss that because they haven't been, well catechized, or at least for me, that was the case. I didn't know, about how Mary's Immaculate Conception and how it fulfilled prophecies in the Old Testament until I got one of my kids baptized, and the deacon who did it, he, explained, but no one had ever mentioned it before. So I think it's easy for people to overlook that.
Yeah. And I think there's probably a lot of people that like don't even realize it's a holy day of obligation, which, to be like totally transparent, I forgot it was a holy day of obligation last year. Like I totally knew that it was the Solemnity of the Immaculate Conception all day and I forgot to go to mass. So, I mean, like even people who like sort of understand the theology make those slip ups. But yeah, I mean, I really do. That's okay. Not to be like advertising, but I was thinking about this today. That's really why I love this group, because it forces me to like try to keep up better with the liturgical calendar and like go back and study things that I like knew once upon a time, but they have like walked out of my brain since then. And I have just forgotten so many things. So whenever we're getting ready for one of these little broadcasts, I'll spend like 10 or 15 minutes like brushing up on something. And I'm like, oh yeah, I used to know this stuff. What happened to it? And then I'm like so excited when it's back in my head and I get to think about it again.
Well, I think that about wraps it up for us tonight. Is there anything that you would want to add?
No, I think that's it. Thank you to someone just said hashtag shameless plug, which yes, that was a completely shameless plug. Thank you everyone like for joining us and dealing with our shenanigans and postulating about things. Hi, baby.
Yeah. She's getting fussy, so she had to join us. And apparently she likes being on camera, so.
Oh gosh. Well, she can take our place when we're all old and ready to retire from this.
So thank you for tuning in. We will make sure to put those resources that were mentioned in the links of this video, and make sure to come back next week. And again, this is Fidelis, and we are signing off for tonight. And I hope you all enjoyed the video, and we'll have a good night.
Bye, everyone. I can't end the broadcast. Sorry, everyone. You're just going to have to wait until I can end it. Let's see. Here it goes. Bye.